everybody, and welcome to Rocket Lasso Season 4, Episode 2. How is it going, everybody? I've got a little bit of news to cover, some upcoming things, and then we can start diving in and answering questions from YouTube and Twitch. So, first of all, everybody, start getting those questions together. If there's no questions, we can't tackle them. Okay, so some news items. First of all, I'm going to be on the MoGraph podcast on the 18th, on Monday the 18th, so that should be good. Looking forward to that. And then, let's see, what can I announce? Let me look at the calendar. And then on, not next week, but the week after, so that's going to be April 20th, Rick Barrett is going to be a guest on the live stream, so that should be good. He'll be the first guest of the season. I got to start lining up some guests again. I should get EJ on again. He hasn't been on in a while. Love EJ. That'll be good. And then on top of that, so yeah, Rick will be a guest in 2 weeks. And then the week after that is me at NAB presenting for Maxon. So that's going to be exciting. So that'll be that will take up the live stream of that week. So keep that in mind. And let's see, I think that's most of the announcements. That should be pretty much everything. How is everyone doing? I hope well. Get those questions together. We'll be jumping into those very quickly. Let's see. Okay, Sphere Factory's name is now changed to Nifty Wanderer. I'll keep that in mind. And we got lots of people hanging out. So we have Nifty Wanderer and Magic A Public I Dad. I'm probably pronouncing that terribly. Gumbo, what's going on? Tom, Tobias, Dean, Mick, Scott, Trey. Pro Tools, of course. Zach. Hello, Zach. Welcome. Mr. Matt Dog. And more names. Junior, Clarky coming in. Sid, welcome, welcome. Monthies. Thanks for coming, everybody. So start getting those questions together. Other things to mention. I mean, everybody here are mostly regulars, but keep in mind that Rocket Lasso does have a bunch of different plugins that we released over the last year and a half, 2 years. We have Ricochet, which is super fun for bouncing a spline around a volume or even off of objects that are outside. So like bouncing a laser off of some mirrors and whatnot. And then mesh to spline for converting meshes to splines in a procedural way. It also works with selections and fields and certain perspectives and angles. That one's really fun. That's a fun one to demo. And then Slicer, which it's just a really powerful slicing tool that added a lot of additional functionality that had never existed in any other slicer tool. And of course, Dean, mentioning recall, saying recall, you use it in almost every file. Recall is one I don't end up talking about too often, but is definitely a nifty little plugin for helping speed things up. So lots of people chatting, but nobody's put any questions in yet. So, question. I'm not sure. Well, that's not a full. I think you accidentally hit entered. There we go. Magic's got a question popping in. I will click it, and it'll pop open a window, and I will mute it, and I will switch the screen. And let's see what we got. Bloop. So it's from Tavo, which I know gets linked pretty often. So either somebody in the audience is a huge fan, or they're just doing good quality work all over the place, or both. So they've got it looks like this is going to be one of those type, the 36 days of type. So this is the number 1. And it's all fun and drippy on top of some text. And I imagine the main thing that we're looking at here is, it's really nice. I like these. The main thing we're probably looking at is the ability to transition from this mesh into being around some other geometry and then getting these nice drips going. So that's where my head is at as far as the powerful part of this one. What is the interesting thing to tackle from it? So let me make some room so I can see the reference. All right, excellent. So my thought is the first basic bit, and let's even mechanically look at the first basic bit, because honestly it's the more complicated part, and that is going to be, how do we get those drips? Those nice looking drips. Now, in theory, you could do some sort of particle simulation and do that, but let's pull up the image again. you'll see that there's a very particular look to these. You see how there's a very continuous line traveling around? So I think that gives us a clue how maybe even this very specific one was done. And let's see, what's a good way of doing this? Let's do, we'll do a letter. I guess to begin with is a nice thing to collide with, but we'll do something different. So we'll grab a text primitive, set that to middle. So we'll do a nice big R, change it to a beefier font. So I will jump to my recent go-to of scroll, lemon milk, bold. Nah, maybe not bold. Let's do medium. Excellent. So with that, let's make it thicker. I'll jump that up to 50 deep and then make a volume out of it. So a volume builder into a volume mesher. It's already decently large, but I'll still drop this down to get some better resolution. And even there, this is not a crazy resolution, so I'll go down even a little bit further. And then a little bit of smoothing goes a long way, and I do mean a little. So just round out those corners a bit, give that some nice looking rounding so that the mesh doesn't look too rough. And we can do a couple different versions of that, like if our final looking geometry, if we want something nice and round, obviously we'd want to crank that up a whole bunch and decrease the resolution. But we can also make another copy of it, and that one will have a much lower resolution. So let's see how low we can go. So that's better, but still quite a bit. 9. Okay, so it's going to be less. Is that enough detail? Now, smoothing is going to be overpowering on that type of thing, but let's make sure. Let's see how much it's not intersecting properly. And I guess we'll have to drop that down a bit. And then just for the extra geometry, I don't want to lose too much of the rounding. Actually, what we could do, we'll cheat this a bit. That's going to be very rounded. We'll take the original one, and I guess I'll change the color here so you can distinguish between the two. So the pink one is our low poly one. So if we say, okay, our low poly one kind of rounds out the corners more, well, let's just go ahead and round out the corners of the original one more so that ends up matching. So see, that starts becoming very close, meaning the ultimate point there being we can use this low poly version for doing collisions, and it should look pretty accurate on the full version. And in theory, we can't even go to the volume mesher and add even just 1% adaptive. Well, 1%. I guess it's relatively low, so we'll have to go higher. Oh, I am not on the right one. Put that back to 0. Go to the low poly one. I'll even rename that low poly so I don't confuse them again. And even if we just go up a little bit, you'll see that's going to start dramatically decreasing the poly count. And we can bring this up a bit if we want, but you don't want to lose these corners, which it is starting to lose. And it's already pretty low poly, so I will leave it at 0. Okay, so that could be made editable, but right now it's nice and parametric, so why not keep it that way? And let me check something. No, that's fine. Okay, so my thought here is we need some dynamic splines to be falling on this object. Now, we got a couple different methods we could do. We could do soft body splines, and we could also do... We could do soft body splines. Actually, I'm going to also use ricochet in here because this is a really good opportunity to use ricochet. But we'll do it the non-ricochet way first. So we can... What is my thought? Because, okay, here's the thing. We got two different types of splines that we can drop on this thing. We could drop soft body splines, or we could drop hair-based splines. And a lot of the reference, you can see that in very few of the, most of these are looking like they're a full ring. Like you see a ring go down. Only one, I only see exactly one instance of something separate dripping down. So a series of rings feels like it would probably be a pretty good idea. So what's a good method for doing that? I'm trying to think of the way I might do this best. If I make a end side, and I'll jump that to, let's say, 64 segments. Might be too many. Let's do 48, a little bit less. And the ring doesn't need to be anywhere near that big. I'll jump that to 50. And pivot that from 50 up in the air. And that could be fed... I'm going to make it editable and just move the axis down to 0. So now it's pivoting from that point. Let's see if this works. I would like to clone it onto an object, and the object will be the low poly object. And it is currently, it should be based on the up vector. Well, it's already aligned to the object. Now, if we get the proper alignment going here, and I'm not sure yet, so maybe 90 degrees, and then maybe not 90. Oh, there we go. Maybe negative 90 on P. There we go. Now you see how they're perfectly on the surface. So yeah, all those are randomly distributed through the object. We could choose different random seeds, get those laid out in different spots. And we've got a decent amount of variation we could do by adding in a random effector. And that should drive not the position, but it should drive the rotation. And yeah, let's see that. Yeah, this orientation we can completely spin around, so that can go all the way up to 360. And we could potentially do a little bit on one of these other angles, but I don't even think that's important to do. And then, yeah, scale as well. So scale, we could say uniform scale. It doesn't hurt. And if we say absolute scale, then we can say that's the largest they ever get, and then we just go smaller. So they could go, you know, nearly 0, which would be -1. So now we got a whole bunch of different circles of different sizes. That's the thought. Now, I don't know if this will work within the cloner, so let's give this a save. Give me a moment to make sure that. Okay, cool. That's not a spoiler. Drop this into episode 2, scene files, scene file 1A, multi-lines. Okay, so here's what I don't know if it'll work in the cloner. I would like this to be a, I think it's under hair, spline dynamics. Now, yeah, let me just, I'm gonna hit play here, and we need to see if each of them behave individually. Nope, you see how they're flying inward, which means they're each a copy of the previous one. So I'll just make a duplicate of that for now and delete the tag, and then I'll make the second cloner editable. That way it's actually made each individual one editable. And now you'll see if I frame forward, if I frame forward, everything popped. Oh, well, okay, refreshing actually worked. But now you see they all fall down, so they're each individually calculating that way. Hitting undo, I do want to make one change before I make it editable. And that is, I would like to lock a particular point. And that will be the point at the bottom, or the nearest to the bottom. So selecting just that singular point, I would like that point to be fixed. So now that point is stuck. So even when I make that cloner editable, they should all push down. And then even though there might be some intersections already, I would like to push this out just a little bit. So when I turn the cloner on, I don't want it just a little bit away from the surface. So let's say out, yeah, out on Z, you see those push directly out. So even just a single unit, that way it's not perfectly intersecting with the surface. Even say 2, because we're gonna give a little thickness to those. Okay, now that we've done that, I believe, yeah, now I'll make a duplicate of it, make it editable. Turn it off. And then save, editable, and now we got a bunch of them. And now they should all individually, hopefully, droop down. It's gonna probably do that one pop refresh, yeah. And now hit play, and yeah, they are all sticking, and they fall down properly. They're pretty long. I probably should have made them a little bit smaller. Actually, trivial to do. We just hit undo because we're still in a situation that we can. And let's say that was too big. I would like, I'll turn on both of them. I would like to hit T for scale and scale them all down. Because I fixed it, maybe that is not going to let me. Maybe this tag prevents that. Yeah. Okay, fine. I'll do it with a cloner. Yeah, I can set the max and the min, so I can pull this down. You see they're all going to start shrinking a bit. So I'm going to grab the maximum, say your maximum is smaller than it had been. Okay. Again, making it editable, and we'll probably get that one weird pop. And then rewind. Turn off the other copy. Hit play, and now it's still decently long, but that's fine. We'll move on from there. I would like this to be a collider. I don't know if it needs to be editable or not, so I will say I would like a rigid body, which, no, not rigid body. This hair. We need a hair collider. Let's see if it has to be editable. We should be able to tell pretty quickly, but okay. And you see very carefully, I just say a couple frames forward because you never know how long that will take, but already it is successfully colliding with it. So there might be some shaking around. Yeah, there's a lot more drooping down than I thought there would be. We need a lot more of these near the top, which is doable. But let's do a couple other things as well. The undo to get that one back again. And I do want a lot more of these at the top. So let's make more copies. You see there's a lot more. We could hit the random seed a few times, see if we can get some more nearish the top. And then the best, well, we could do a selection tag if we made it editable. We could, I'm thinking if we just scale them or make them disappear via a new plane effector. The plane effector will be told to don't move them, scale them uniformly, absolutely, to -1, and then affect the visibility, which should hide them. So right now they're all shrunk to nothing, but then limit it via a linear field. And now you can see some of them started to exist again. So if we set that properly, then I should be able to move that up and, yeah, we need the opposite. Switch this to Y+, and now they're all at the top. Shrink that in. Oh, I guess they exist in the in-between spot. I've never kind of understood visibility, or maybe I always have a bad intuition for the visibility checkbox, which should be kind of stopping them from existing. And I guess it's working inverse of what I think it would be here, but that's fine. We can do that via the fall off still. So I'll make the fall off nice and large, and just make sure they're kind of nearish the top. We could do that more with some randoms and whatnot, but there we go. We just get some near the top. That's the thought. Okay, excellent. Save, editable. 1 frame forward, 1 frame back. I think we might have removed the collider, which we did. Simulation. It's nice that this doesn't need to be made editable. And then hit play, and now bloop, they all flop over. And you see they're pretty stretchy, and they're kind of just flopping straight down. Let's see if we can change any settings to make that happier. So selecting all of the hair tags. There's drag, there's radius, stiffness. Let's add lots of stiffness, and get rid of all the rubberiness, and see what happens. Oh my goodness. Maybe we need some rubber? Okay, apparently we need a little bit of rubber. They're not, we can do a little bit of rest hold, but that's probably gonna pop them back to their original position, yeah. So rest hold's a bad one because it's not gonna hold the shape. I kind of wanted them to hold their shape a little bit more, but it's not, these controls are not as intuitive as the soft body ones are. So the settings are not, we're capped at 100. There's no iteration count. We can go easy on the gravity, so we can just say -1. But let's see. Yeah, those will fall slower, and gravity's less strong, and they are drooping down. But I wanted them to hold their shape a little bit more, and we don't want just a rest hold. Rest hold is too powerful. Let's do 0.1% rubber. Deform, I'm not even sure what deform does. Radius, I don't know what radius will do. Might keep them away from each other a bit, but yeah, they're still flopping over way more than I wanted them to, which is a shame because it's not going to be easy to do this with soft bodies. We could try and wedge it, but yeah, just not as good with soft body. Yeah, Zach's agreeing about the visibility. Yeah, it's always opposite of what I'm thinking. This radius became too large for the points we have in between, so that's not working. And the stiffness is just not, it's just not doing what I want it to do. So the length is going to go and melt down. I mean, to show you, even right now, it's going to look a little bit goofy, but let's just pretend that that is indeed what we want. And this still might break itself, but let's feed that into a volume mesher. It's not going to see it because this isn't being seen as a spline, so I will feed that into a connect. Any step here might break things, so I'll just keep that in mind. Feed that into a connect, and then it's still not acknowledged, but then I'm pretty sure if we feed that into a spline mask and say, okay, volume. Oh, that's a volume mesher. This whole thing was my fault because it should have been a volume builder. And then volume mesher. Ta-da. Okay, volume builder. Let's go real small. Select the spline. Radius of 1, density of 22, and now you can see we start getting these different lines drawn. And the idea here is that we can make a series of blobs that will go down. If these were kind of circles that were somewhat holding their shape, this would be working a lot better for us. That was the thought. Not cooperating as much as I would have wanted, but we shouldn't be discouraged. Well, I want to do some more additional connections and whatnot. Let me think. Because we were doing all that fancy stuff with, we did a lot of fancy stuff there, but let me just try some different things. So that was one approach, wasn't working as well. So instead, let's bring back this copy, and we've got all these circles. Instead of the approach we were doing, let's remove that and instead make this a soft body tag, and then turn off gravity. So I'm turning off global gravity, and now these should just fall. Actually, turn off gravity. So yeah, the only thing that's going to happen is if any of them were colliding with any others. And then we can make this original collider a proper simulation collider body. Now they will strike at anything that's intersecting is going to get a little bit twitchy, but let's not worry about that yet. And then here's the main thought. If we create a simulation, forces, and a field force, we can say that the actual geometry, which is the low poly, is going to be viewed as essentially the gravity. I want to calculate from the surface, and it's going to be a little bit difficult to see. Everything's pretty large here. If I say display the lines, you can see that all the... Why do they disappear when I get kind of close? That's a little bit weird. As soon as I move away from the axis, it all disappears. I mean, I can just move this up to prevent that, but that's a little bit weird. But anyway, you see all these lines are aiming kind of towards the normals of the object, which means there's kind of its own little gravity. Now, this one isn't the quickest one to calculate. Keep that in mind. And we've also got this radius, and I want that radius to be really large. So say 555. That should be big enough to catch all of them, hopefully. Don't display the box because we know what it's doing. Now, these will either pull away or pull towards. So let's hit play. They're getting pushed away. So, and you see it's a little bit slow. Switch it around though. So I would like the strength to be up at 15, and that's the radius, but I want the direction to be inverted. So now they should get pulled towards the surface. So now we get a series of circles, and now there's no gravity specifically pulling them down. All they care about is being kind of around the surface. So this is a little bit more what I was aiming for, but there's gonna be a lot of randomness in the way that they've changed their position. So you see how they're sort of all blobbing around, but there isn't a lot of gravity aiming downward, but you do sort of get these nice swirls randomly going around. So, you know, along those lines, that's not terrible. Now there's a problem where the volume builder sometimes doesn't see this properly, and I'm curious what it will do with this. So dropping that into a copy of the volume builder, it is seeing it there. It might not see it when we hit play, but you know, it's there, it's applied, it's working reasonably well. And it's even viewing as a spline, which is quite nice. And yeah, we can round those out. And now you see we've gotten some nice kind of blobs going around. A lot of this, I wonder to what degree, I'm just trying to think artistically speaking, because I'm trying to build a rig that does this. In a lot of ways, it's like, well, why build a rig when you could just like draw the very specific lines that you want very specifically where you want to? That could be done if we turn on the right type of point or the right type of like snapping. There's potential that we could get something like that working where you'd be like, I want to draw from here to here to here to here to here to here to here, from here to here to here, like, and draw a whole bunch of individual points. As long as you did the proper resolution, that would just sort of work. So that'd be one thing to do. This overall gravity is good, but then yeah, what I want to do is stick them at a certain point, and you can't stick these very easily. It's a little bit of a pain. And then Scott is requesting that the bubble concept that was in the other thing, that we sort of addressed that as well. You see that we do get those bubbles intersecting. I was just kind of skipping over that part, but that's a valid thing to ask. In fact, yeah, I'm going to move into a completely different layout now, and I'm going to be using my plugin Ricochet to show this because I think it is actually the best method that I'd be able to do. So we're going to start this again. If you want to very precisely follow along with this, you will need Ricochet. So just throwing that out there, but we'll do a couple additional steps. I put Ricochet in the file name just in case somebody is on Patreon and you can't properly use this if you don't have Ricochet. I will make an editable version though, so that could always be viewed. Okay, anyway, so if we were trying to get some bubbles through here or some sort of cool intersection going, why don't we do it with some cubes instead, just to be slightly different. Here's my thought. Let us clone those and clone them very closely. We're going to do like an old GSG type setup here where they're all but intersecting with each other. So we got a whole cluster of them. A brand new, we don't need that anymore. I don't think we need that. We're going to just make a lot of this from scratch. We've essentially started again from scratch here. So a bunch of cubes that will receive I suppose a random effector. The random effector, I do want to randomly move them. I do want to do a random scale. And it doesn't have to be a uniform scale. So I'll say an absolute, and then we'll say minus 0.75. Copy that and paste in all three. So now we can get all these different rectangles. Then applying a rigging or simulation rigid body. Those all become dynamic. But then if we give them a very simple a force to follow the position, and that doesn't have to be too strong, but I'll go up to 15, which is decently strong. And currently this is a collider. I don't want it to be, so I'll delete that for now. So now, by itself, I hit play. Those are all, that's a little literal for my taste. So let's make them explode more. I'll make them explode more by having them be all like way more on top of each other and actually give them some baseline rotation, 90, 90, 90. Okay, so now they should kind of pop, and there. That's a better kind of random-ish layout. Although I wouldn't mind a little more randomness in the scale. So let's say that these go to minus... actually, just what I want to see is some larger ones, some smaller ones, and some medium ones. So something that you can do in this type of setup would be, I'll make a duplicate here, and I want a larger one. So I'll make that like way bigger. And I can say, okay, but I want some smaller ones. So I'll scale that a bit. But I want that to be more common, so I'll make a couple of copies of it. And then I'm going to copy all three of those and duplicate, and then hit T for scale and scale down to even be like 50% of that. I'll duplicate that again. So now odds-wise, there's going to be a lot... there's very few large ones and then a couple large ones. So that becomes a new layout. I hit play. Okay, quite a large explosion. So you see I've got quite a few of them. At this point, I think probably one less there, and we want more tiny ones. Okay, that's a slightly better ratio. And we probably don't need quite so many, so I'll say 7 by 7 by 7. Oop. Okay, hopefully that's a little bit better. Hit play. Okay, cool. That's still too many. 4 by 4 by 4. I guess that's okay. That's okay-ish. So if that is supposed to be our final shape, they're all getting attracted to each other a little bit more than I want them to. So I'll select all and say, you can be a little more casual with the way you go. And what might be nice is a bunch of friction. 0 bounce, and we'll say 500% friction. So now they'll get stuck a little bit more at these weird angles. And slightly more interesting layout. So there's a level. Why don't we bake those dynamics out? Control D, dynamics, cache, bake, and that will bake all the dynamics. So I should be able to scroll to any given time, and you see that's nice and stuck there. And now that becomes essentially a piece of geometry that we can do whatever we like. And let us move our turn off axis, very important. Let us move our actual text into a position so that we get like kind of a fun intersection that still leaves it readable as an R, but looks kind of crazy. I would kind of like those to be smaller. Can we scale them down? No, we cannot. I thought the bake might allow us. I mean, at this point, I think that I could just bake that down. Dare we? I kind of want to put that into a connect. Don't weld. Probably a bad idea. I'm going to do it anyway. I've baked that down to its own geometry. So now it's a little bit easier. I can scale that down, rotate it, and we just get something a little crazier looking. So if that becomes our chunk of geometry, which I like well enough, move that back. Let's see, the axis is a little bit of a pain, so I'll go, whoops, don't reset. Scoot back. Okay, there, that's what I wanted. Okay, that's now that. Go back to regular axis, turn on the axis mode, zero out my random rotation here. Don't scale down. I forgot they rearranged those. 0 rotation. Okay, very nice. Now, we need to erase that out. Here's that original. Let's look at the final render, actually. That seems like a good idea. That's the final rendering one, right? So let's take a, do we reference it? We'll make copies as we need. I'll drag that in as a copy, and you see that we've now created a physical bit of geometry. But that's actually the opposite of what we want. I would like, turn that off, I would like this box, let's say boxes. I would like that to subtract So let's say A subtract, or yeah, we're subtracting this from everything that came below. We're going to want, that's the final rendering one, so we want that to be relatively smooth. And then we'll move this up and then start rounding it a bit so we can get those nice rounded edges. So kind of eating away there. And then making a duplicate of those boxes. Now that's the real one, but you see we get this nice geometry that's sort of missing where those were. So I think in general, that's how you would get that type of shape, where it's like, okay, that's missing. We can push that as far as we want, as far as smoothing these out. So the more smoothing we do, the more it's going to eat away. And you see we get that really nice implied shape, which is really all you want. Like as soon as that's pushed away a bit, you know, I think it works pretty well. And it's still live, so let's do a quick save, and then we can scoot this and see if we get, turn off axis, and scoot this around, see if we get a slightly cooler looking position or scale. I mean, I wouldn't mind if there's a little bit more of a blob sneaking through certain areas. Yeah, okay, that's even way better. So, okay, that's now the overall shape with boxes. So we'll save that. And then we're going to need the thing that we're colliding with. So what is actually getting wrapped? Well, that is going to be, we need the low poly version. Needs to be the one that gets wrapped. Now, the real one you see is way sharper. So we can deal with that. We do need to make ours sharper. And now that's going to be matching significantly better. And then I might need that smooth, so I'll keep it. And let's make another copy of the boxes. These could be instances. I'm just doing it quickly. So now it's a union between those two, but that's actually what we want, is those two merging. How far down can I go here? Because we're going to be using Ricochet, and Ricochet will run reasonably well. So going super low poly is not as important. So yeah, with that in mind, let's turn on the smoothing and try and match the rounding there. But we don't want to lose these sharp edges here because we will be wrapping around those as well. So what we could do is move the boxes above the smoothing, and now those don't get smoothed. In fact, we could expand it a bit. So by adding a dilate and erode, essentially that's expand and contract. So now, well, just think of it as inflating. So yeah, if we just inflate a little bit, you can see how pretty much everything is properly trapped within there. And I'll even inflate that a little bit more. So we'll do 1.5. Yeah, so that's capturing everything almost perfectly. Now, as I said, we're going to use Ricochet here. Give that a save and call this Collider Inner. And now we need a second one. Actually, no. We don't need a second one. We could do a second one, but Ricochet might be able to do this for us. Although, yeah, it could potentially break. We can manually make one if need be. So now, here is the thought. If we make, I'm going to hide the real geometry, and now we're just looking at this collider. Now, let's make a rocket lasso Ricochet. And Ricochet is a spline tool for bouncing around inside an object. So if I just move this inside the object right now, and I want to be pretty close to an edge, which we'll see later. We can go to a nice side view and just scoot that up so it's inside, but just barely. Okay, so now if I feed in this as a child, if I were to take this inner collider and drop it inside the Ricochet, or my preferred method, switching it to object mode and then drag in the collider, then it's going to disappear. Now let's hide our collider, and you can see that we've got a line bouncing around. And if let's hide these boxes temporarily as well. If I start increasing the length of our Ricochet, actually we'll go down to 0, and now what we essentially have is a laser bouncing around inside that piece of geometry. So as I increase the count, we can jump that from the original 1,000 to 10,000 to 100,000 to 1 million long, and now you can see that we've been filling this up, and look how quick that is. And now you can see this entire thing is filled with tons and tons and tons of these little bouncing lines. So that's really fun as a demo, but we actually don't want that many bounces. What I want is to trap this in between the walls of this. Now what we could do is an outer shell and an inner shell, but the tool actually does that for us if we do the proper combination. And we'll do that via, and I'll make this short just so I don't accidentally do something I regret. Under modify, I could say I would like to do a surface offset. Actually, what we want is a shell. So I'm going to turn on visualize and let's start dragging up a shell. And now you can see that it's going to show us 2 pairs of dots. There's blue for an inside and then orange for the outside. And what that means is it's kind of taken the mesh and shrunk it in and pushed it out. And based on that, we can be seeing both of those. But that means we can trap this in between those 2 shells. So if I'm going to make that pretty tight and then move the ricochet until I'm in between those 2 walls. So you can see we've got blue and orange. And as long as I'm in between those 2, the laser has gotten trapped in between those 2 shells. So let's go back to hiding that. But now you can see, and let's turn off visualize because we are successfully hiding in between. You can see that that's now trapped in between those 2 shells and now it's only outlining it. So now back into ricochet, I can say, yes, right now you're just bouncing. It's perfectly bouncing off the angle. It's going to hit the surface and bounce just like a laser would. But we can start influencing that. I'm going to say I would want it to bounce by aligning to the surface. So it's going to start trying to follow the angle a bit. And as we drag that up, you see that the line's going to start getting smoother. It's going to travel around, in a much smoother way. So happy with that. And now we can make as many, or by increasing our length now, you can see that that's wrapping around. And it looks like it's wrapping around the outer surface of everything. So let's look at the original cubes. And you see, look, it looks like they're wrapping around the outside of the cubes. And let's turn on the original mesh there. And now you see it looks like it's wrapping around the outside of that as well. So we've kind of webbed the entire thing up. And it's just Ricochet automatically doing that. So we could click random seed and get completely different layouts. We could align it a whole bunch. We could change the surface. We could change the randomness in which it's going to like dramatically change the angle it goes. But we can go pretty low on that. And it's going to make it in general a lot smoother. And we just find whichever one we like. And we could change the length or whatever we want. Let's go 10 times as long. And then you see it's going to be wrapped up 10 times as much. So if you want to do like a spider web type thing. So yeah, that's a very nice, simple wrapping there. Ricochet working interactively with us here. So if that indeed is our wrapping, and I'll give that a save because it's working very nicely. That is a simple setup in which we can say, okay, cool. I want to feed that into a volume builder, volume mesher. Say builder, see the ricochet. It should be really thin. Let's do 1.5, a voxel distance of 1. Density of 22, which is, that's how often it's sampling along the line. And now you can see Ricochet has given us this nice blobby line traveling all over the thing. And just automatically, I think it starts looking pretty great. We can do some additional modifiers, like we could do a smooth, but you're gonna have to use a really light touch on there depending on your resolution because it's gonna erase it out if you go too far. So let's temporarily turn that off. And then you can also do a close and open, which is going to you'll see where some of these are really close. It's almost like it's closing up the webbing. So that can be pretty cool, where that can, close up some of these holes so they feel a little bit like they blobbed in together. And now that that's happened, what I like to do is a smoothing deformer. So grabbing a smoothing, drop that as a child of the mesher. And now that's going to pinch everything down. You see how it got really skinny? So let's get rid of all the stiffness, and based on the number of iterations, we can start making that really skinny, or we can go easy on it and don't make the line too thin. And a lot of that's going to be based on the resolution. So we could decrease the resolution to 0.75, which increases the resolution overall, and you see everything looks smoother. And then the smoothing needs more iterations to counteract the additional geometry. So yeah, now we smooth that out. Now look at that very liquidy looking overlay where you get these nice bulges everywhere. They're crashing into each other. So we intentionally went for that effect. We could be doing the opposite thing as well. So yeah, we get this nice webbing look going. Keep in mind, we did a lot there. We can get rid of the open and close, and right there, immediately it feels less like webbing and more like, individual lines blobbing through each other. So that's one thing. But now let's push it a little bit further based on this nice rig that we have. And actually, we can use Ricochet for this as well, since we're already using it. Let's go all the way. Let's call this one the Ricochet main. So now we know we've got inside of here a Ricochet, generating all those base lines. Now I'll say, okay, create a matrix object. And that matrix object, I want to clone onto an object, and said object will be the Ricochet. So look at Ricochet and generate a bunch of matrices. So you can see they've generated in those spots. Say, I don't want to align the clone, and how many do we want? Well, I want more than 10. So we'll add in a decent amount. Looks pretty good. We could change the seed down here, random seed, so we can, random seed is not, I guess, no, That's interesting. Yeah, it's a count of 21, but the seed on a matrix object doesn't seem to randomize the position. That might, well, it's fine. I mean, they're already randomly there, but I was going to say I might be inclined to change that to a step. So now it's going to be every certain distance it'll generate one, which should give us a much more even distribution. 3, 3, 3. Yeah, so I like that type of distribution. That type of distribution here. Whoop. Let me get a sip of water. Ah. Okay, so now we got some matrix objects that are generating a position for us. So then what we can do is make another ricochet. So second ricochet, what is this ricochet going to do? Well, it's going to be shooting off into space a set distance. Let's say it's way shorter, like only a length of 100. So you can see I've got a laser shooting out a length of 100. So then I'll say, actually, I would like you to not be based on Z plus, but be based on a matrix object. The matrix object will be that new matrix that we made. And now I've got a line shooting out from every single one of those matrices. So I'm going to put this in the proper order of operation. So first the ricochet is generated, then a matrix, then a second ricochet, and those are all shooting off to the right. These are based on the orientation of the matrix object. So if I go to the original matrix and start rotating it, you'll see my laser lines will also rotate. And if I just aim those all down, I can say -90, those all aim straight down. We don't have to do it here. I'm fine with it just passing straight through. But a reason to do this with ricochet is if we tell it to collide with the original object, we could actually stop it from like passing through the geometry. That's not super important for what we're doing here. So I'll just grab the matrix. I'm sorry, I'll grab our ricochet. And under length, I can twirl it down. And let's see. I'm trying to remember my own setting here. Oh, I remember. We need to go into modify, and I'll say I want a multiplier field, and the multiplier field is going to be multiplying some effect inside a ricochet, and I want to affect the length. So the length of ricochet will be driven by, and let's add in a random field, and as soon as I do, you see we get all these random lengths coming off from there. Visually hide the random field, and yeah, now I've got random lengths applied. So cool, those lines are there. I can drag that back into, yeah, I think I just drag this into the original builder, which should now merge these new drippy lines with our original object. Yeah, so here's an example where ricochet would help. You see how this line is passing straight through and it kind of appearing from nowhere? So let's see if we can actually make that work for us. I'm going to say I have a terminator object. So if I say, okay, I want it to terminate. When do I want it to terminate? I want it to terminate if it hits our inner collider. So let's drag that into there. And the instant I do, now you see that line. Let's see, is it work? Yeah. So now you see that line got terminated as soon as it hit that surface, and now it didn't get generated. But these that didn't hit something, they're free to just continue dripping downward. So very nice there. Let's rename that to drip. And under volume builder, there is the drip. I would like to, well, we can increase the radius because those lines are, well, increase as much as you want. So we can add some additional thickness there so those look like they're dripping down. It's really cool because now we get this drip going from there and it happens to connect with a different line. Let's see if the scale along actually works. Yeah, it is working. In certain, let's turn on, there's a setting for this. Down here, there's scale per segment. So now we could actually say, actually, this gets really thick. So up to 5, actually, 5 is probably too much. Let's say 3. So you see they're really thick, but I can say, actually, at the start of the line, they're going to be way thinner. So let's not go too thin because we actually want to see the line. And then we can draw that so it gets skinnier as it goes down. And if we get that right, yeah, we can even make it a little bit thicker in the beginning, so it's going to like really get skinnier in the midpoint. So yeah, just by itself, that was able to create these different drips. So that was one way of automatically doing it, but keep in mind you could also clone onto the tip of these splines, and then you could get different size ones. This is a little bit more of a uniform one, but this is a really good example of where Ricochet, instead of us doing a bunch of dynamic simulations, we were able to say, hey, Ricochet, go and just do this rig. And because Ricochet is so dang parametric with everything, I don't want to make it go choppy. So I'm going to temporarily turn off that secondary ricochet, and we can even turn off the matrix. We can go back to this original one. Wouldn't be a bad idea to turn off the volume just so we can see it in kind of real time. Let's say these ricochets both are drawn, show custom. Let's go with a bright blue. I mean, it's not going to show up on select unless I'm deselecting it, but we can always move this, and you see as I move it, we're going to get a very different look. So it's like, okay, completely different layout. Turn back on the matrix. Turn back on our ricochet drip. And now it's updated. We've got completely different layout. Turn back on the volume. Completely different layout. Completely different lines. The drips are regenerated. They don't intersect the object. They'll properly drip down. And it's done. It was able to update. Like, that's something that you could animate. This can be jumping all over the place, but you could animate that. And now we get these drips going. Pretty straightforward. Yeah, potentially you could even run a soft body on this to get some additional like drips coming down. Or what do I want to say? If you selected everything properly and subdivided, you could actually get these to droop in their different positions. I don't want to make it editable, but that would be something you would be able to do. I guess while we're here, because it's looking pretty cool, why don't we spend a few minutes and just render it up in Redshift? Why not? So let's see. What's going to make it look best? Well, let's save it. My subscription that I had with GSG Plus is not currently active. So I can't easily drag in that HDR, but we've got built-in ones in Cinema, so we can take a look at that. Where do I want to start? Let's make a new material. And I'll say create a Redshift material. And there's a couple different ones we want. So let's start out with, let's get something transparent for sure. It's rendering that icon, so it's taking a second. Let's just double click that Redshift material. And I think it'd be kind of cool to do a preset of the tinted glass. So we'll be able to give that some tint. I think because I'm broadcasting, like this Redshift, like this refreshing is like taking a huge hit. Let me know if the stream starts lagging a bunch. But yeah, let's do that. So that will be, should make that the glass. Yeah, let's make those the glass blocks. So those will be on the boxes. And then we've got another material. And this one I think we should make really shiny and really dark. So let's get rid of almost all the color. It's already really shiny. So I guess that's honestly all I wanted to do with it. And that one I shall apply to our actual rendering mesh. Actually, no, I want that to be on the blob. And then the final one will apply to our overall final mesh. And I guess at this point I should open up the Redshift render view so we can actually be seeing. Oh, yeah. Let's get an HDR going as well. So what's the best way of doing that? If I make a Redshift light, dome light, and then we need to add in a texture. So let's go into our asset browser and find our HDRs, which Cinema does come with. I don't know exactly where they are. Maybe under textures. Nope. Maybe, oh, HDRs. There's a whole folder right there. Cool. So let's do an exterior. And yeah, they've got some set up here already. I will download this nice blue outdoor road looking one. And does it let me drag to there? Oh, surprisingly it does. I didn't think it would let me do that. Very nice. Okay, so now save just in case it freaks out with Redshift and me streaming, which is always a possibility. Okay, nice. So that is now giving us something immediately. I don't want to see the background. So just give me this end result. Excellent. And now we can play with our materials. Whoa, chugging. This does not usually happen. So I'm thinking that, yeah, this is all the resources I'm doing for the live stream are probably stopping Redshift from wanting it to go. Yeah, I've done a lot of rendering in Redshift and it doesn't chug like this normally. Okay, so we'll have to use that sparingly. Let's see how slow it is if I try and like, yeah, you can see even just try and move that window up. It was like, whoa there. So I'm thinking we want our transparent material to be, let's go with something kind of slimy looking. Let's go with a greenish color, some jello cube looking thing. And then our main material, let's give that, let's go with a pink. We'll do that, and let's do a bit of a overall emission also of a pink color, but we'll go a little bit brighter. and give it some emission. Let's say 1, see if it overdoes it. Bing! It's a bit overdoing it. Let's do 0.25. Yeah, better. Yeah. The looking at it though, I think maybe the drips would look better at a brighter color since we're going so pastel. So base properties, color, we'll put that back up to 1. And I think a nice bright yellow. Nice pastel yellow. Maybe with a hint of green in there. Yeah. And then what's a good way of getting a background with a redshift? I don't want to block out the light. I guess we could do a cyc of some sort. I guess we'll just do a plane. And I'm going to pause that so I can place this quickly. Z+, push it back. I'm not super particular. I just don't want the HDR to be affected too badly. And duplicate that material. Even these are like refreshing, so there's a hiccup as I create them, where the redshift renderer is creating the material for those. Okay, let's just make a solid color. We'll go with a nice bright pastel blue. 1 emission. Base properties, come on. 0. And no reflection. So just a luminant material. Plane. Save, render. There we go. Nice, simple. I mean, it'd be nice to get a gradient and whatnot, but you know, just a few minutes in Redshift getting some different materials going. Obviously, we could push that stuff a lot further. Turn on the bucket rendering. Come on! Oh yeah, was there any lag going? Oh, nifty, you're right. It would be nice if we had aimed for like some food type colors. If this was some sort of honey or caramel, that would be nice. Oh, it's doing the irradiance point cloud. I didn't change the settings. That might have helped as well. Ooh, but it does look way better with the full render. So let's just let that finish since it's chugging along now. And start getting the next question. And so many nice details here where you see it looks like all of our liquid is slightly hovering off the surface, but with Ricochet I could just change those offsets I created and just shrink that down a little bit, and all those would move way closer to the overall mesh. And we're not going to do it here, but when it comes to Ricochet, I had done demos, and I think scene files come with Ricochet, where I had done things where it's like I created all these drips, and I created a second layer that would bounce around the entire thing, but also be addressing these drips. So it would be avoiding both the original geometry and the drips afterward. I wonder why that one bucket's taking so long. So yeah, layering like a Ricochet on top of a Ricochet on top of a Ricochet on top of a Ricochet. Like you can get some super crazy combinations going. Huh, that one bucket doesn't want to resolve. Well, let's take a look at questions coming in. But yeah, we took that one decently far. Okay, so Trey, quick question. Any ideas for the issue of not being able to adjust the axis on a MoText object? Like hit L and slide the axis where you need it to be. Is the only way to do this inside of MoText, inside of a null, inside of a fracture object. I wonder if there's something wrong. I mean, it could be that this bucket is like where a lot of the streaming software is doing its thing. I don't know, but I don't want to torture it too far or freeze up the computer. So let me, I just hit pause on that and it's still thinking. So hopefully, hopefully I didn't completely take over the computer there. I am still able to move some things around. Yeah, I'm giving up on that bucket. Come on, release me. Yeah, it looks like Redshift and XSplit, which is my streaming software, are fighting for the same resources. What would have been nice here on the letter, looking at now, even though we have all these boxes, like taking out a big chunk of it would be nice to do a couple chunks taken out of the R that weren't the boxes, and then this line could have been like bouncing through those holes. Like if this was cheese, we could put additional holes and the ricochet would be bouncing inside of those as well. Cinema might be dead. I did say I was saving often, so we would have lost. Oh, yeah, I woke up. I was just about to give up on it. Okay, I'll render that out properly later. So save, and let's tackle Trey's quick question there. So to recap, so I can do the proper time code for the video. Essentially, can we adjust the axis inside of a motext? And the motext isn't even called motext anymore. It's just called text, but it has it is motext. So your point being is currently the axis is over here. So we could like center it, but we can't do it from the middle. And if you were to try and, I'm assuming you are mostly concerned with affecting this stuff. Yeah, you're annoyed that the axis is on the bottom left and of the front of the object. Okay, so I don't disagree. Allow this goes to, let me show you the very, very specific problem, which I assume is what you're addressing. If I add a plane effector on here, everything's going to get pushed up. That's fine. But if we say rotate, you'll see that when I say rotate, that, I guess, well, let me do a couple things. First of all, this should be affecting the letters, which is what it is doing. So yeah, you can see it's spinning. And it's like, okay, well, it does feel a little bit weird. Look at like the X. It feels like it's spinning a little bit off axis. It's like, okay, well, what's it doing there? Well, if you select the text, you can see that there's a little green dot. The reason it felt like it's off axis is because it's forward. Now, we do have this axis control, so you can actually change the position. But you see it's actually doing it globally between all of them. So while I could go to the front view here and be like, okay, can I manipulate this and change the axis? It's like, okay, I very carefully could put that in the middle of the X, but there's no depth setting on that. And so that is where that's pivoting from. No way of pushing it back as far as I know. It'd be weird if this was actually a three-dimensional parameter and they're only hiding it. If we say user interface and I want to see this as it is a, let's say vector. Yeah, okay. Now I turned on vector and now you see there's actually 3 numbers there. Does this number actually change anything? No, they didn't use it. Okay, I thought I could I could outsmart them, but they were counting on that. So yeah, I thought we could show the, I just knew for a fact that even when you see this 2-dimensional vector, it's really a 3-dimensional vector, but it looks like they didn't tie in that third vector into pushing it forward and back. So having said that, looks like we are stuck in a world where those pivot oddly if it is parametric, if it is built, or if we don't make it editable, we're mostly stuck with it pivoting from those spots. I mean, we could deform the geometry forward, but then it's kind of losing the point there. And then as you said, we could put this into a fracture object, and I think the fracture automatically goes to the dead center point, but it might not, honestly. So let's find out. So just to show you, if we fed that into a connect object, now it's just geometry. So I did that just so it's just seeing geometry. And let's also remove the plane effector. And now that it is just geometry, I'll throw it into a MoGraph fracture object. So now it's fracturing. And if I say explode segments, all of those have exploded. Ignore the Fong. We can fix that later if need be. So now that that's happening, I'll tell the fracture to look at the plane effector. So now when we spin, what does it feel like it's doing? It does feel, yeah. So you see how they're all a little bit different as we rotate here? So I think it has here, the fracture made a pivot point at the dead center of the bounding box of each individual segment. So in this case, it is now pivoting from what I would want to be the center point of each of them. So that is something. The Fong breaking, I wonder if that's coming from here. If I say manual, yeah, if I say switch the connect to manual, that actually fixes it. And yeah, so now that would pivot a little bit more from the center, but that doesn't change the fact that we can't offset those from being parametric that way. The pivot is where the pivot is. Does the Voronoi fracture give any more control of where the axis is? Because we got the distribution sources, but if we don't give it a distribution source, there's sorting, there's effectors. No. 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 None of these would give us control over the axis. What's funny is, like, we have the old fracture object, and just to throw it out there, instead of the old fracture, you can always use the Voronoi fracture. If we drop that in and then we delete all the sources, then it will now explode these out into individual elements as if they're each their own fracture object, which in a lot of ways behaves the same as a fracture, but it does give you the additional options that you would have inside of the fracture object. So that there are reasons why that could be good. But yeah, having done that, even if we drop the plane effector in, I imagine it'll pivot from that same spot again. Yeah, it's back to finding the center point of the axis, so it's looking exactly the same. I thought that there might have been some sort of control in there, but this is just like physically moving everything. So if I do that, I imagine they'll all still pivot from, yeah, they're all still pivoting from their dead center. It just offset them. So that's just a straight up offset. Optimize cell scale, that doesn't change anything. That doesn't change anything. Sorting would change the color order, but this isn't changing the axis. Detailing just adds, makes it look broken apart on the inside. Connectors don't mean anything. Yep, so I'll just say, yeah, there's nothing to be done there except for making it editable. Or, I mean, if you wanted to be real meticulous, you could always just individually create your letters, and wherever that letter pivots from becomes where you could make things pivot from, I think. Like inside of a regular fracture, let's just go all the way here with a, let's say that this becomes a T, and then we make, I only want one, and you see that is, well, that's pivoting from here, but it's like, okay, well, whatever, let's put that into a null, or in this case, I'll just put it into a connect object, or potentially even better, because why not? Well, let's make our letters, so I could say T, E, X, and T. So, manually arranging them if we were so inclined. T, E, X, T. And it's not like this is super difficult. Like, that is totally doable. But they're still pivoting from that front point. But keep in mind, or there's that modifier I brought up last week, and we can move into our nodes, grab a geometry modifier, list view, shrink, and grab the geometry axis, I believe. If I drop that inside, then now we could say, yeah, that offset, but that was a little bit weird. Geometry orientation. That moved all the way to the left. I wonder if the Mo text is making this behave a little bit differently than I was expecting. Because you can see I could physically move the text, and then in theory, yeah, I can move it over to the original center point, and then here, yeah, now I can move forward and back. And if I did that in theory at 0, now you see it actually is dead center. And what I'm wondering is, yeah, it's kind of moving them a little bit, but if I move this into each of them, I now have a deformer. But if I click on the original object, you can see that the pivot point is now at the center point, and those are all individual objects. And if we drop all three of these now, T, E, X, T, drop those as a child of a fracture object, the fracture will well, right now fracture is set to explode segments. I'm going to put it back to straight. And by putting it straight, it says, okay, I'm not worried about it. Whatever you feed me is what I'm based off of. So now that their axis is correctly pivoting, keep in mind, you could have made it editable. We could have put it into a null. We could have put it in a connect object. Like, any of those are valid, but I didn't want to show you the new method. Now that that's happening, I think that if we add in the plane effector and now we do that same rotation, they'll pivot around properly. But now you can see it's actually pivoting from the bottom where I put the axis. So that's the somewhat parametric but somewhat manual way of doing it. So each of them pivoting from a manually placed one. So, which there was a more dynamic answer for that, but there's sort of a workaround there. 3A, text axis. Okay. Scrolling up, I saw that there had been a second question. Pierre, what do you got? How to make soft body behave like this? Uh-oh. Let's find out what you got. Mute. So this is from David McLeod. McLeod. I apologize as always, David McLeod. It might be Leod. That sounds better. David McLeod. David McLeod. Okay, after like 10 times, I feel like I get it. Okay. Okay, so what do we got anyway? Resolution. I guess it's Instagram, so we shouldn't expect it to go crazy. Okay, so first of all, that's super cool and trippy. There's a lot of kind of distortion happening. I kind of feel like we're seeing the shape of a person, but are we? And they are, yeah, see, it kind of became a cube. It's kind of a shape. Oh, it's an Oscar statue, reading the description. But yeah, you can kind of see the form of a figure there. The interesting thing here is that these blobs are jumping in to form that shape. Yeah, that's pretty crazy, actually. They're jumping in to form the shape, but then they're free to move out. That is a very good question. Okay, I've got an idea. I don't know if it'll work, but this is a really good techie challenge, so thank you for the question. And very nice animation from David McLeod. Okay, so scrolling down. We're going to keep it simple to start out with. I would like a simple sphere, and this will be the shape we're trying to fill, okay? Or the shape we're visually trying to fill. Actually, let's make it a square, because a sphere is like kind of visually too easy. So let's do a square to prove the concept. And then that's the shape we want to fill. Giving it a render display tag, I want to see the line of it. So now we can see the shape that should be getting filled. Then we need especially during a live stream, a nice low poly sphere. We'll keep it simple even. We're not even gonna make that many. We'll make like 4. I do think we need to treat them individually, which is a big part of the challenge of this one. I wonder if we have to round that out. Well, let's go step by step. So here's the thought. Let's say we make I'll just make a giant box as well. So this giant one, that's the space we're trapped within, so they can only drift inside of that space. So simulation, collider body, not automatic, instead a static mesh. Then we've got the sphere. That one shall be soft body, and that one is free to blob around. We want no gravity, so Control D, dynamics, general, gravity, 0. Now we need some turbulence. Simulation, forces. I'll start out with turbulence. We're definitely moving into the world of field forces. Starting out with turbulence. So let's give it a decent amount of strength, about half of gravity, and a visually understandable scale. Okay, so just by doing that, this should be drifting around, doing its own thing. Let's give ourselves like a whole bunch of time. So that's just going to be drifting around. Let's make the scale even larger. So yeah, that's free to drift around. So here's the thought. If this cube is a shape that this sphere suddenly has to be inside, it will get, I guess we'll put it into its own little null, so it's kind of like we know that that's living in a world that's being affected by very specific things. That sphere is going to be affected by certain forces. It will only include, in this case, turbulence and a force, field force, and that goes inside just to stay organized. And what is that going to see? It will see the inner cube. Rename that inner cube, and we'll call this one box. So inner cube is now being fed into the field force. What is that going to do? Well, based on the object, no, where do we go? Yeah, layer, surface, and now we suddenly get a direction based on the surface. We already know from before that it was backwards, and I also want this to be really large, so let's jump that up to like 500. So essentially it should be trapping everything inside this general area. Invert the direction. That way we know it's attracting it. So let's just let let's crank up the power here, 55. So it's twice as strong as the floating turbulence. So if I hit play and just let this drift, you can see that this individual sphere is free to drift. And then as soon as I turn on the field force, oh, I should include it, shouldn't I? Include the field force. Now you see that gets pulled in. That's fine. It needs to be way stronger, clearly. So 4 times as strong. And the sphere will get a decent amount of damping. So that should be draining energy out constantly. I don't need to see this preview. So now, again, here's a concept. It's not applied, so now it's free to drift thanks to turbulence. And we'll make that stronger. So turbulence is like, okay, I'm free to drift, and it's just wandering around, doing whatever. We even have it push away a little bit from the center. And then suddenly this field force turns on and it's like, oh, I have to go into the center. I need to be there. And honestly, we're probably gonna have to go like pretty crazy strong on the strength here. So a couple things we need to check out. First of all, let's turn on our display again. And like these lines are a little deceptive. I want it to, don't show the length. I think there's actually a setting for this. Under object, layer, restrict effect to the outside. Yes. So now only this, as soon as it gets inside this box, it's like, oh, it has no effect. It doesn't care. So it only cares if it's outside of the box. So, and in theory, we could and should do a fall off on there. So it's a lot stronger when it's further away. Actually, maybe that's not even true, but let's do the test again. So la 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 la, free to drift around, floating, floating, floating. And then suddenly the field force turns on. It's like, oh, I got to be in the center. And you see its own energy is going to drain out, and it drifted to the center. So, okay, simple enough. Let's slow down that rotation. No friction, no bounce. Let's add in a decent amount of friction so it's not inclined to start spinning a bunch. And that sphere can be represented by whatever color. Now, let's make a second copy of this. Copy, paste. This one, then we'll start over here. This one will be over there. Give it another color. So now we got 2 different spheres, and they've got 2 different field forces. And because of the way I copy and pasted, let me make sure. Yeah, because of the way I copy and pasted, they have different field forces, so each one is looking at their respective field force. So they're both turned off. They're both free to drift around and do whatever they want. I might have pushed a little too far, so let's make sure that that was big enough that they weren't colliding with it. Yeah, so they're free to drift around. They're doing their own thing. And then suddenly, I turn on one field force, and that one's forced to go into the center. And I turn the other one on, and now the second one is forced to go into the center. So now this turns into getting the proper combination of them being able to squish. So structure is important, but shear isn't, and flexion isn't. So now, yeah, now as soon as I did that, see how they squished into the space a lot better. And we could even go easy on the damping. Shear, both of those could obviously be relatively low. And now you see it's even able to get crushed. Maintaining a volume conservation could be somewhat important, or even giving it a little bit of pressure so they can kind of reinflate. Well, let's see, if I turn off the field force of one of them, you see that one was free to like drift away, and then this one reinflated. So that's what I feel is the base concept here. Now they were drifting in the part that I don't super have a lock on, and we'll save it before we get too crazy. Fill space. Soft body. A couple things I want to do. This inner box, which is what we're basing the shape off of, I'll feed that into a connect object, and I'll just call this shape. And then the field force, I'll override the original object with that. And this just means later we can very easily change all the objects at the same time. Instead of having to manually link, I can just change what's inside of here, and that automatically becomes the shape. So yeah, now we got 2 shapes, each of them fighting to fill that. I will make a third. And give it a third color. So yeah, there's 3 different ones. They're each doing their own thing. free to drift and do whatever they like. We do have this global turbulence, which I'm having real trouble getting a good scale from that. Okay, way bigger scale. It's working better. So now you see them each drifting, doing their own thing. So now manually say, okay, you want to be in the center. And now you want to be in the center. And you want to be in the center. So now they'll all fight to get inside of there. And now, yeah, actually, that's doing a pretty good job. You see that is doing a pretty good job of trying to be that shape. And a lot of it, I believe, I don't want to go overboard with them being on the outside, and maybe it would have to transition. But if we keep on making the strength stronger and stronger and stronger, it's going to be forced to be really inside that cube. You see, it's like, you know, now they're really taking on that cube shape. What I don't want is them to get whipped into that center point like crazy fast. But you see right there, like, because I've made that so strong, you see how it's forced to be like, and into the center, like with a lot of power. With the right amount of like drag and drift and whatnot, we could probably slow them down. Let's see what happens. Let's add in like 55 is a huge amount of drag. Let that, actually, no, they're still kind of free to drift around a lot. They'll probably still whip in. Friction, overall friction could help. So a simulate force friction immediately should drain. Let's crank it. Oh, also we should keep in mind that nothing gets applied unless I drag it in. So that is, we are looking at yellow. So let's see how strong that friction is. Yeah, okay, see the friction actually did stop it from getting like whipped in there. But do you see how it's keeping that cube shape really well? So let's see if that it will follow through. So let's also add friction and add friction. So let's give them again freedom to drift around. And then one of them goes in. And now, yeah, you see pink has a lot of force to go in there, but it's not going in too quick. And now suddenly red wants to go in. It went into there in a reasonable speed. And now yellow wants to go into there, and it's going into there in a reasonable speed. But very much they are taking on the shape of that cube. So I think overall the theory is working very nicely here. And the soft body, we can give a couple details. We could allow for more stretching and let that wiggle around a bunch. But I feel like we want a little bit more pressure. Like, yeah, I want these to try and inflate a decent amount. Let's not push it too far. Yeah, if we push too far, they'll start sneaking out. But the most, yeah, a reasonable amount of inflation, pushing out, filling the space. And then suddenly pink is like, oh, you know what? I'm out of here. And it's going to rebuild its shape and just drift and rebuild. Oop, no, turn it on. Let's turn off another one. So red, free to go. Turbulence will start pulling it away. And like I said, something that could be a good idea is a, yeah, let's build a general repulsion from everything. So that's really straightforward. Save. And I need a spherical shape. Is that a good idea? I don't think it is. Let's do it as a separate field force. And I don't like, there's the attractors. I don't like the attractor. But if we instead use a new field force, and we'll just call that push. We'll call it push away. That one will be based on, no, we don't even need too much strength. I'll go 25. The object will be a spherical field. That spherical field will be huge. And it's full power. So remapping full power all the way. And I think that pushes away by default. We just need to make sure that this push away is in the force list. So manually apply, manually apply. It's important to build this type of rig as much as you can when there's very few, because every time I make a change, I have to make it to all of them individually. I know when I'm working, I'm constantly proposing, like, we need to very meticulously do everything. We need to manually, or we do it meticulously so we can do it via like a cloner. But we can't do this via a cloner, really, not that it comes to mind, because we need things to turn on and off individually. So now, actually, it looks like the sphere, let's turn off all the field forces, which they are, and they're still getting attracted, so I probably did it backwards. Direction, invert, and yeah, now they get pushed away. You see they're getting pushed away from the center, but at a reasonable speed. So the reason to do that is so that when we turn off the, right now if I turn this on, it's going to be like, I have to get to the center, and I have to get to the center, and I have to get to the center. And honestly, that friction's a little strong. So let's drop it to about half. Now when I turn one off, it's going to be like, okay, I'm done. And it's going to drift away. It's going to be inclined to drift away from the center, which is the point of that. And we can crank, you know, as I built it individually, the push away, we could make it way stronger. And now it's twice as likely to want to push away. And now turn it back on. And because the attraction force is more than 4 times stronger, it will definitely come in. You see immediately it's helping take on the shape. But turning all of them off, they should be like, okay, we're all individually out of here. And then they all come back. I wonder if there's a fall off to these remapping. Yeah, it does look like there's a fall off. That's why they're so slow. Can I do all 3 at the same time? I hope so. Nope, sadly. Anyway, I'm just going to take inner offset and crank it, and inner offset, crank it, and inner offset, and crank it. So as long as they're within the radius, they should get pulled in full strength, even if they're far away. Excellent. So since that seems to be working, let's make 2 more, and then we'll make a new shape. Copy, paste. Bloop. And just keep going with these garish, overly bright colors. And let's move that down. Cool. Okay, so now we've got a bunch, all of those individual rigs, each ready to be individually turned on. They might be a little bit large for the volume, so I will select all of them and shrink them a little bit because we're already filling up the space pretty well. So I'll say 75. 75 so they all can fit a little bit better. So currently we are on this cube, but I guess let's stress test it. It's going to make it, it will make it go way slower. But as I said, this is feeding into the shape, so I can change all of them at the same time. So let's do a letter, but we'll just do something simple like a letter T. I guess we could, it would be nice if it had some rounding, so I will do that. But it also needs to be a significant volume. Maybe, I'm trying to think of what a reasonable shape is to prove. Let's do a letter X. And we need a lot more spheres to like properly fill it, as you would assume. And I don't think that's going to work too well over a live stream. That's a decently beefy one, thicker. And I wonder if we can do that geometry axis again. Yeah, look at that. Just by dropping geometry axis in, boom, instant center. Like, we're going to be using that a lot. Parametric automatic center point. Okay, so that, this letter X, which is now, it is what it is, drop that instead. Tell that not to be shown. And then this should have all updated to an X shape. So those should just want to be somewhere inside the X is the idea. Open, 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 open. It'd be a good idea to make an overall null to contain all of these. Anyway, I kind of wish I could hide the sphere away, which in theory we can, but right now I'll just keep manually turning them on and off. Anywho, they should be free. Actually, they'll want to go inside the X, but we've got that overall fall off, which is pushing them all away. We could do additional things, but they want to be inside the X, but as far from the center of the X as possible. So as soon as I turn one on, then it's like, oh, I want to be inside the X, and now it is inside the X, and it should be kind of stuck there. But look, it is doing a very, very good job of taking on the shape of the X there, so quite pleased. Turn on green, and then now you see, again, it's sticking out to the outside. Turn on the next one. Here comes yellow. Turn on the next one and the next one. So let's see what happens when they fight over it. So let's see if it can actually push that in a little bit. See, green is pushing back. So like red is trying to get in there, but it's pushing back. I wonder if our push away, how much effect that's having. Well, it did push it in a bit. But let me turn off the push away. And yeah, as soon as I turn off push away, they're all a lot more free to fill up the overall volume. I don't know if this was made in, if the reference was made in cinema, but this is the way to do it because this is working perfectly. Anyway, if we wanted this to work a little bit more automatically, this push away, we do want the push away doing its thing, but we need to limit it. So we can create a mask. So there's a mask on that. And what is the mask going to be? The mask is going to be whatever the shape is. And then I'm going to say, hey, the shape is, what is the shape? The shape is going to be the volume. And that should just be filling the volume as a mask. Don't calculate, don't display these. Something's displaying them. Anyway, let's see if that seems to work. They're all turned on, so they all should fly in. Are they going to do a good job of filling up the volume? They seem to be. Let me turn off all of those fields. Pink, 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 pink. And do they seem inclined to drift away? Yes, they seem to be. I just, it was possible that the push away was inverted. Doesn't seem to be. So now we'll turn them all on. Squish. But these have zero friction on each other, so, and the original turbulence should still be inclined to drift them around inside. So in theory, one of these should be, yeah, see how the red is kind of free to keep moving around, but within the shape. So eventually, actually, it would be really good would be if each of those individually had their own turbulence. That way, they're not, right now, if the wind blew on the pink one, it would also be blowing on the yellow one in the equivalent way if they're smushed up against each other. But if we made different turbulences with different, there's no C, not turbulence, which has always been too bad. But if we, if you put them at different scales, essentially you can treat them, or different frequencies, you can kind of treat it like they have different seeds. They'll quickly diverge. If each one was different, then they'd be able to slip past each other in theory a little bit more enthusiastically, because each one would be drifting in a different way. But yeah, doing a good job of filling the volume. As Lignazio is asking, could we increase the sphere resolution? Yes, you could. There is a point at which dynamics will not be as happy having a larger one. You will have issues where they might start exploding. It's going to obviously run slower, but there's nothing stopping you from increasing or decreasing the resolution of these different blobs. And even right now, they're very much trying to keep their shape, mostly because we told them in their own dynamics to have some inflation, this pressure. But if we got rid of, let's get rid of almost all of the pressure. There's a good chance that they could just like be forming blobbier shapes, but then they're not going to be as inclined to fill up this. So I think the pressure is actually kind of important now that I think about it. Hitting undo, immediately you'll see them inflate and fill up the space better. And this started working really well, really quickly. But there's a lot of push and pull we can do. Like right now, if we really want these filling up the space more, you'd want to increase the pressure. So I can jump that up to like 25. But now, and you see, they filled up the space more, but they're sneaking out from the outside a lot more. But that's potentially fine, because then we can grab the individual field forces and say, okay, yeah, you want to be inflated, but it's now we have to counteract it by increasing the strength that they're getting pushed in. So going 10 times as much seems dangerous, but let's do 4 times as much. And now instantly, there's so much force telling them, no, you have to be inside that shape. They're getting a little bit shaky, but I was able to increase both of those, and they counteracted each other a little bit. So now let's let them drift. Drifting, drifting, drifting. And then turn it on. They all get sucked in, and because of their individual inflation, even here you see the blue was kind of inclined to be in between, but the way that the forces are pushing, that eventually forced into a different spot. And they're very much eating up their different areas because of those two forces fighting each other. An increased resolution would allow them to fill up the spaces a little bit more, but you want to be careful there, because it can make it look worse instead of better, and it's going to calculate way slower. Just because it's working well, I'll make one more sphere, because I want to see what happens if one more sphere is trying to fight its way in to the collection. Okay, so there's a fourth one. I copy and pasted, so everything should be working there. I'll change that to 3 just to make sure. Force 3, yep. So, yep, they should all be turned on, so immediately everything's going to get pulled in. They're each individually inflating. So now red and yellow are like, wait, who's going to get what spot? And it looks like yellow mostly won. But then even on top of here, it's the type of thing that could be fun where you could keyframe additional parameters so that one of them could become more dominant. Like right now, red, which is this one, in theory, if I grab its tag and I go to its mass and I change this to a custom, I'm going to go to from world density to custom density. I'm going to turn this from 1 to 11. So now it's 10 times heavier than yellow. And now you see it suddenly was able to fight back and push yellow out of the way a bunch. And I think at this particular angle, we're not seeing it, but I think red is very much, yeah, you see red completely pushed yellow out of the way. So we made that one more dominant. So if you did do things like use Espresso or even like Signal from GSG to have variation here, then you could have each individual one being like, I'm stronger, I'm weaker, I've got more pressure, I've got less pressure, I want to be on the inside, no, I want to be on the outside. By putting in all those additional variations, you could start getting like way more control over what's going where. But as it is right now, yeah, I just now told that one to be free. And then you wouldn't want to just turn these on and off. You could be using different forces. Like even here, we could have things drifting in and out randomly. So all these could be controlled by one giant field that's saying like, hey, this random field is saying, hey, turn on, turn off, turn on, turn off. Like you could do that. Right now there's like a very blatant on and off, but they don't have to be. You can definitely tell that this field force is taking up a lot of calculation power because look how much quicker it runs. Now we turn it on and suddenly that shape is getting squished. Squished. Squish, 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 squish. I wonder if a push up, I mean, we got a very strong forces like fighting each other here. Probably stronger than I want them to be. But I wonder if I don't even know if the force, the dynamics force works on soft body. So how do we find out? Actually, it shouldn't be too hard. If we turn off all these forces and turn off the push away and we hit play. Oh, we should keep in mind that, forgot to turn that one off. I need to manually, and I need to add this force in, but you gotta keep in mind, I couldn't select all of them, drag it in, because it's gonna say multiple values because each one is slightly different. So you do have to do it individually, and that's where I'm saying, like, make your changes early. If you're gonna make 50 of these, do your tests when there's 5, and that way you don't have to manually update this 50 times. So anyway, actually it does, I can't tell for sure, but do you see how these seem to be attracted to each other? So that's what force does. So if we increase the strength even more there, yeah, oh my goodness. Okay, pause. Yep. Okay, they're super duper attracted. What I want is them to be repelled. So now they're gonna wanna push away from each other. Now they can't get close to you. No, they can't get close. I can turn on this natural push away. But now the thought is if we let that get pulled in and we let this get pulled in, they're going to want to stay as far away from each other as possible. So as I sneak these in, yeah, look how pink got like repulsed away from, oh, but it is kind of squishing him. This force might be really strong though. So a little bit might go a long way here. Yeah, dropping to 15 suddenly. That's, whoa, why are they all getting, oh, I went to positive. That makes sense. Negative 15. Okay, let's see. So these want to stay apart from each other. So you see red pushed yellow up and is trying to stay away. But it's not so much that they're destroying each other. So now that that's happened, if we let them all get pulled in, they might fill up the space a little more. You see how yellows got pushed away naturally from blue, but blue's getting kind of squished into the corner. So we might need to use a very light touch here. Say negative 5. So now suddenly blue is able to get in and do a little bit of its thing. Let's turn it off and see how much I can recover. Yeah, I mean, it's having a big effect, filling up the space. But I did want them to be able to fill the volumes more. As soon as you turn it on, you see they get pushed away. Honestly, a little could go a long way. So even just -1. So now the hope would be with that force, as soon as two were right up against each other, if they have any space they could go instead, they would. That's the idea. But, yeah, we got a lot of forces to play with here. Whee. Get out of my way. Yep. Cool. I mean, I think that totally nails it. Like, you could increase the resolution. You can make more of them. You saw how easy it was to change the shape. I mean, even right now, that's working great. Let me just go back to the original shape and change that to a letter T. Now it's a letter T. Hit play. everything should have updated, and now it's like, okay, fine, I'll fill up a letter T instead. So like it couldn't be easier based on this rig. So I'm quite pleased with that. Let's see if we change that right now to a new letter U. Whoa, you see those were trapped in the middle and they're getting pulled in both directions. Eventually one should win out. It'd probably be good to let them drift away a little bit before one got sucked into the center point. But yeah, you see green eventually. He's like, oh, I want to go this way rather than that. And yeah, these are all bunched up on each other. But let's see if I turn that force on. Even at 1, are those still going to be inclined to be like, oh, okay, maybe pink will move if it can. Yeah. A couple of those look a little broken. I wonder if we could tell those to not have self-collisions. And then, because we're not really worried about one falling in on itself, so turn off self-collisions, and then those might repair themselves. Well, it did something. I'm not even sure what that's doing. It seems a bit confused, honestly. That instant transformation of a letter wasn't super happy. Let's turn it back on. Blurp, blurp, blurp. Interesting. Yeah, it's becoming it's a very mechanical shape very quickly. That might make sense because there's not a, well, how do I put this? This is not the best shape to be just tossing in there because it's very, well, okay, several things. First of all, we've got all those subdivisions. Probably way slower to calculate. So this letter we're feeding in, be really smart to say, actually, you're only subdividing every 45 units. You see there's way fewer polygons. Let's even go all the way up to 90. So very few polygons, but we get the nice overall shape. And then it'd be a good idea to bevel that or put into a volume mesher, but a bevel might actually be better in this case. So bevel, bevel, bevel. There it is, bottom left. Okay, so creating this bevel should round out those corners, which is going to give it a little more direction. And I mean, it's going to slow it down, but we could add even an additional one. And by rounding out those corners, it's going to, this shape that's like generating what orientation they should go, it gives it a little bit more definition. And I think in general, that could make it just look better as far as the final shape is a little more rounded. So let's make that an X again, because it had kind of liked it. And let's see what happens. I'll hit save. So everything gets pulled in. Those are a little more rounded. And the rounded shape, I think, will just be a little bit happier in general. Maybe making these not collide with themselves isn't, maybe we want them to collide with themselves. Maybe, maybe not. And yeah, so many different settings. Inside a soft body, you know, the more structure it has, the more it can't stretch. I do feel like stretching is not a bad thing in this circumstance, though. But then flexion and shear are how much it's able to bend. So if we say, hey, you're not as allowed to bend as much, you see they became more spherical. So they're taking on the shape less and they're more like these little blobs. That can go a long way. And let's rewind and turn back on their own self-collisions. Yeah, that seems, you know, so now we got rounder shapes, and that is merely the shear. Drop that down to 1. And then the flexion, which is the big one. And instantly you see it's like way sharper edged. Presumably you'd want to take these and put them into like a subdivision surface or something so that they could get smoothed out that way as well. But yeah, and of course you can find like a nice happy in between. Like it doesn't have to be so extreme. These are able to bend, but they might maintain a little bit of roundness. You never know. Let's move that over there so it's not getting trapped in between. Blurp, 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 blurp. Ta-da! Their powers combine. And then freedom. Goodbye, red. Goodbye, pink. Hello, red. Squish. Yeah, fun rig. I like it. I like it a lot. I'll just grab all of these and rename it on-off field force for the people who are using this scene file from Patreon. Okay, we got time to squeeze in one more question. It's a good time to mention that you should totally join, where is it? Plus Lasso /community. First of all, if you're not already, you should jump onto Rocket Lasso Slack channel, which you can get to by going to rocketlasso.com/community. And you come and hang out with these other nice people. And if not that, then, but you want to support Rocket Lasso, then you can go to Rocket Lasso Patreon. Get the URL from that. Okay, so here's the other valuable link where if you are supporting on Patreon, then you get access, first of all, to all the videos early. You also get access to all these scene files as I make them. As these get created, I upload them every week, so you can reverse engineer things. It's always really fun to reverse engineer. You get discounts on all the plugins. That's actually pretty major discounts on those. And there's even like freebie stuff where I released that gemstone collection, and you completely get those for free, where normally it'd be like 20 bucks. And there's also bonus streams and whatnot. Jumping back to the chat, I'm going to scroll up because there was a bunch of questions earlier. Let's see. There's Pierre's question. Talking to each other. And let us click on Crossfader's link. Click and mute. And, ooh, looky. Okay, so this is from Mrs. Tema. I'm not sure if you pronounce the first S. But we got some crazy dragon scale look. Working on a project that didn't end up going forward, but it's a cool liquidy loopy thing. Goodness gracious. That looks awesome. First of all, the colors are morphing, but they're clearly flowing with the original object. That is super, super cool. I know how, if we were to go about it, there's only one way I can think to go about it. I am trying to think if that method would work at all. I haven't done it in a while. Think. Would, it's the direction that I'm worried about. The secondary orientation. The primary orientation is easy enough. I don't have the entire thing in my head, so this could horribly dead end, but let us jump into cinema and do some of the basics. My thought is let's make it as parametric as possible because we'll probably end up changing the shape a bunch. So cap segments down, height cap segments down, rotation segments 4. And then we end up with this shape. And then that goes into a cloner, which makes exactly one clone, which is my way of parametrically scaling that down skinny and then creating that into a connect object to, again, break it down into a base model. So it's a parametric way of me squishing it down without destroying anything. So that's the most basic shape. That's going to be kind of our scale shape. So then we need a giant like flow map. And there's only one way to do that in vanilla cinema. And we will need a field force. And that's super tiny. Do we want to go big? I think we want to go big just for default dynamic stuff. So let's say 1,000 by 1,000. Yeah, that's reasonable-ish size. We can always shrink that a bit. Okay. I'm pretty sure before we get to the field force, we need the volume builder. Volume builder. Vector volume builder. The volume vector builder needs a field noise. I haven't done this in a long time. Field noise going there. Okay, cool. Now we see something. You see this giant something. This is a giant vector group created from a volume builder, which is a completely different mode that it has. Currently, the field is set to a random field based on noise. Let's start scaling up the noise until we start seeing some sort of coherence. And you can see pretty quickly, we are going to go from like madness to coherent. And we need these to be actually pretty large based on the reference. So that's going to start getting bigger. Now, the volume builder's size is determined via this field. So I think we can go really thin. And we'll again go up to 1,000 and 1,000. Okay, so we end up with that. That by itself isn't what we need. We need, it might be vector curl. It's going to be one of these. So let's try a vector curl. And is that what I was expecting? There's no settings to it, so it is what it is. So let's not... oh man, the orientations, there's more to this than meets the eye. This random field, if I start stretching it really vertically, nope. Two-dimensionally? Maybe. Yeah, that seems better. Okay, so what I just did is I shrunk the noise so that the noise is very, very flat. And you see all these suddenly, they're not perfectly, but they became way more two-dimensional looking. You see, as we look at this from the top, see how those look like they're kind of spiraling around, and that's spiraling around. That's pretty much what we were aiming for. It's probably still a little small, so let's scale it up some more. You can see it slowly morphing if I do it slowly enough. Okay, so that's all fine. Now we need to give the random field some animation speed. So let's see what that does. Let's save it right away because we're in very unfamiliar territory. I haven't done a lot of this since the version of Cinema that had field forces came out. Let's call it vector curl. Vector curl. Okay, hitting play. Let's see what we get. Okay, so you see it's all moving around, slowly changing. That's way too fast. Let's go down like 5. Little changes go a long way. So all those are moving and they're giving us a direction. And yeah, seemingly fine. Okay, if that is indeed the case, now, well, okay, here's the way we test it. Let's not worry about our nice shape yet. This isn't going to do anything right now. This is just a list of vector directions, essentially. So if we say, I wonder if we can make it like real skinny. Like, can that be 0? Ooh, it can. Is that two-dimensional? It's mostly pointing upward. Not as good. Yeah, maybe it does need to be 3-dimensional. But then it's got depth to it. Like every layer is so different. Does that need to be like a compound shape? Like do we need to make it into a 2-dimensional noise? I feel like it does need to be. Is that even what vector curl is supposed to do? Let's try vector invert. Yeah, that just straight up inverts it. We don't want that. Vector smooth isn't going to do it. Vector scale, I think we just scale it, rotate, and then normalize. Yeah, I think it has to be curl. Curl's the only one that even makes sense. I guess we can normalize after it. But, yeah, the random noise is in all directions, and I really want it to be 2-dimensional. But then you have to do all sorts of math to make it work. Let's go slowly and see what happens. So, in order to see a little bit of a something, simulate particles emitter R, lay it flat on the ground. Emitter will now be 1,000 by 1,000. It will emit particles forever, but the particles will only live for 90 frames, and it will generate about 100 of them every frame, or maybe every 30 frames. I can never remember. So, constant particles being generated everywhere. With a speed of 0, please. Okay. So particles are being given speed. Okay. So now that's not going to do anything. Now in the field force, we can say, hey, field force, you are based on the volume builder as a volume object. So that should now give it direction. I will set to an absolute velocity the speed of the particle. So now they should be forced to move in a particular direction. The volume builder is going to be, oh, and the field form, well, let's see what happens. So now we can see we got particles going. We need way more to see anything. 10 times as many. More frames, please. I mean, it's staying mostly two-dimensional, not entirely. And you do see that we're getting this nice flow traveling around. You see how like they're kind of free to turn left, but some will turn right. So that's mostly what we're going for. The lack, because it's not completely two-dimensional, I'm a little bit worried. I'd probably have to go watch my own like R22 video or whatever version where that came out to be sure. But in principle, this is mostly working the way I want it to. The resolution of this volume builder is going to interpolate between them, but the actual volume builder, you'd have to increase the resolution, the voxel size to actually increase it. So right now it's relatively low. It also goes to, we're seeing multiple layers on top of each other because of the thickness. So that goes to where we really need this to be two-dimensional. Dag nabbit. How do we make it two-dimensional? So if we turn that back on and I go into the volume builder, we don't worry about the curl yet. Currently, I mean, these are, I guess they're not perfectly vertical, but they're super duper vertical. Because that's super duper 0. I mean, you know, we could also go the opposite way and make it really, really, really tall. Ooh, that worked better, I think. Yeah, tall. So going really flat or really tall in some ways end up being the same, but making it really, really tall, and I might have just gone to like the largest possible number cinema can have. So along those lines, every single one of these layers should be all but identical, and then the vector curl can curl them and we can normalize them. And now look at these really clean lines. That's what I was looking for. Okay, so then hiding it and looking at the emitter, all the layers should be doing the same thing. So we shouldn't have multiple layers lapping each other, although we totally are. Oh, they're traveling up and down. Interesting. Maybe I'm gonna scroll down. Maybe somebody's yelling at me that let's see, burp and boop and block. Yeah, they're traveling up and down, which is definitely not something we want. That must happen because of something here. I mean, I guess there's not a smooth transition. No, like, oh, we do get straight up and down ones. Isn't that interesting? Why are we getting... I thought the whole point of the curl was that that didn't happen. If I watch my own video, it just goes to there's a very specific combination. And that very specific combination would totally answer this. Even that's two-dimensional. I mean, maybe we don't even need to invert it. Like, because this has already kind of become two-dimensional just because I stretched it. So let's try not inverting it. Yeah, well, they're not overlapping each other. But we're not getting that nice curling thing going on. And it also goes to, like, should I be doing the opposite of what I'm doing? I don't know. I don't want to flounder around, unsure. But it goes to, like, we super stretched out this distance, but maybe I'm supposed to do the opposite. Maybe this is supposed to be a very reasonable Y height, and then super stretched out X and Z. I'm going to say that's a big no. Bloop. Yeah, the curl, I mean, those come really harsh directions, but then, yeah, these ups and downs. There should be no verticalness to it. I don't know how to make it two-dimensional. Everything else interpolates. And if I make it 1, it's completely flat. That's not what we want. And even these, well, I don't really see much dimension there. But yeah, we don't want the curls. We want the curling shape. Yeah, Zach, that's what we tried. We tried giving it 0 height, and we tried giving it a bunch of height, and neither are working. I got to watch my own R22 video. I'm not going to pull it up during the stream. So maybe I will indeed watch my own video. And then hit me up again with this question next week, Zach, and we'll see if, or actually, Crossfader is the one who asked. Yeah, hit me up next week, and we'll see if I can do it then. No, Michael, it's definitely not the... I'm supposed to be able to do it with a random field. I might need to convert like a 2-dimensional plane into it. I'm not going to guess anymore on it. I'm confident in the proper way of doing this will be just to watch my own video. Watch I don't remember if it's R22, but that's fine. Watch R22 to figure out vector fields. Yeah, because there's a very specific pattern. I remember constantly making it there, but you need the right combination of like random field and these vector modifiers. And I just don't remember the combination. I mean, it might be like making a rotate and then rotating 90 degrees and then you do a curl. And once you've done that, then everything just instantly works. But we're not there, and we need it because we want a pattern like this, but it has to be completely 2-dimensional. And right now everything we're getting is some 3rd dimension. And I'm not going to flounder around anymore. Dean's asking about the utility splines, which essentially those are all but ready to launch, which I have done a bunch of work on it. So like clean it up and add a little bit more functionality and just make it as elegant as possible. But we end up being really distracted by making the node capsules for Maxon over the break. So I end up not having enough time to both make those and do all the marketing for the utility splines, even though utility splines are super duper important and I want to get them out there because they're really powerful. So that's a priority. Unfortunately, this month is also very busy, meaning that, yeah, even though it's like ready for me to try and record videos, this is not a good month for me to be able to do it. Not until maybe late in the month. And we are also started working on a brand new plugin a week ago, which has also been requiring a lot of time. So yeah, but those will be getting launched because those need to live out in the world because they're really good. So I think that's going to wrap us up for today. Thank you, everybody, for coming and hanging out. If you posted a link and I didn't get to it, hold on to it for next week. I definitely want to check everything out. Make an effort to track things down from like lots of different people. I don't want to be answering the questions. Like last season, there ended up being like maybe 3 or 4 different people who made like awesome things on Instagram, but we constantly saw the same couple people a few times. And I understand people have like favorite people to follow, but the more variety we can find, the better. Like it was fun today making that one with Ricochet because that, you know, it's a great use case for Ricochet, but I do like tackling those. But yeah, we did get to tackle some good ones today, even if we didn't end on the super duper strongest one. Jumping back over to, oh yeah, the redshift isn't going to show up visually too well, but yeah, building this one was fun. I enjoyed it. But anyway, thank you so much, everybody, for coming and hanging out on another live stream. And I'll be doing it again next week, of course. Oh, yeah, if you're in the Chicago area, which I don't think too many people watching the stream are, but if you are, tonight is one of the meetups. They're slowly coming back online again. So tonight is the Chicago Motion Artist Group meeting. So I'm looking forward to that. Should be good. Apparently, there's trivia tonight. But that's going to wrap it up. Thank you so much, everybody, for hanging out, as always. And until next week, bye-bye.